Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's check out Raging Loop. This is the PlayStation 4 version. Of course, we're playing on PlayStation 5. This game's part of the New Year's sale, or Western New Year's sale, I suppose. As some of you know, this is probably one of my favorite visual novels of all time. I think the interface is great. The way they track changes and the way you can jump in and out of the different storylines and the routes is really, really excellent. All the voice acting is good. The art is unusual, not something that I think a lot of people associate a visual novel with. And best of all, the plot is something that well, you can never really predict. I think they did a good job on hiding the mystery of who's good and who's bad. Basically, the game is a story of the kind of the popular part of game Mafia. So if you understand the concept of Mafia, then this visual novel will make more sense to you. Just obviously the names and the explanations are a little bit different, but essentially it's a game of Mafia. There's people that are guilty and people that are innocent, and your job is to find out who's lying. Now this game is available for, I think it's under $10. It's not much. Personally, I feel that this game is worth full price. So even if it was $60, I would be able to recommend this game, especially if you are maybe if you're new to the visual novel genre and you want to try something out. I think this is a good way to start. Unfortunately, it's going to probably spoil you a little bit because of the interface is so nice, and at least to me, it makes a lot of sense. And, of course, not all visual novels are going to have this level of polish and detail. I think if there is something that maybe is not so great about this, is that, a lot of the art is recycled, but it is fully voiced with the occasional, narrative piece not voiced. So, in a way, you can definitely see that there was some... that there were some concessions made to keep the budget low, or under control. I mean, low is maybe not the right word. Yeah, we'll give everybody, because all the voices are so good, so we definitely want to hear them. And again, this is not something that every visual novel offers. Individual control of the volume levels of every one of the characters. I think what is good as well is that I think we'll keep the music normal. Buttons, it's fine. Yeah, and then we also have this force unlock option. So if you do run into what could be potentially game-breaking bug, although when I played it on the Switch, I never ran into a problem where I needed to use this. But if you need to use this and you run into a bug and you get stuck, then you can force the routes to unlock so that you can hit the next route chapter mark. But again, I don't anticipate that's going to happen with us. I do generally suggest that folks buy their visual novels on the Switch. Nintendo does not censor content, so it's up to the publisher to censor content. Unfortunately, there have been some titles on the PlayStation, the Sony store, and specifically the PlayStation store, which have been under a fair number of edits requested by Sony. So if you do want your games pure, then the Switch is probably where you should go. But again, it's not a sale right now on the eShop, and if you're just looking for a sale and you want to experience a great visual novel, then you can do so on the PlayStation, either PlayStation 4 or through backwards compatibility PlayStation 5. So yeah, that was my introduction. Let's get to it.
ペコリようこそノベルアドベンチャーゲームレイジングループの世界へ。私は単なるドルに足らないインターフェイス的キャラクターです。そうですね。リカコとでもお呼びください。 ここでは初めてプレイなさる皆様にこのゲームの遊び方を簡単にご説明いたしたいと存じます。いくつか変わったところのあるゲームですので、最初はぜひとも全部の説明をお読みいただきたいと思います。特に動画配信をなさる方は4、動画やシェアについてだけでも必ずお読みくださいね。最後まで読んでいただけたら私のセクシーな画像が見られません。世間は厳しゅうございます。さめざめさて、何からご説明いたしましょう。
Let's read about the game.
レイジングループはノベルアドベンチャーゲームというジャンルでございます。小説のように文章で物語が綴られ、読んで楽しむゲームです。世に言う人狼ゲームと深く関係する物語ではありますが、人狼ゲームそのものではないのでご注意を。スーパー人工知能リカ子20人と永遠の人狼ゲームを楽しめるとご期待された方、すみません。さめざめ。もちろんただの小説ではございません。時折現れる選択肢によって物語が変化するすごい小説なのです。キャラクターたちが生き生きと描写され、生き生きとボイスを喋ります。せっかくの声をお楽しみになるためや、突如絶叫が響き渡らないためにイヤホンなどされるのも良いかと。とっても大ボリュームな物語ですので、没頭しすぎて数日徹夜なんてことになるやもご注意くださいね。なお、もうご存知かと思いますが、レイジングループは架空の殺人事件、恐怖事件を扱ったお話です。サスペンス、スリラー、ホラー、そして謎に挑み解決するお話がお好きなあなたにぴったりの物語。もちろんこの物語は作り事で、実際の人物や団体や思想や事件などとは一切関係がございません。作中の学問知識、歴史、宗教、神話、科学、医学等の知識は創作を含みます。テストに書いたら0点です。さめざめそして描かれる犯罪や惨劇については現実のそんな行為を推奨する意図など全くございません。そんな感じで現実との区別をしっかりおつけになったらもう大丈夫。本作を思いっきり楽しんでくださいね。
How about special functions?
レイジングループの独特な機能について説明いたしますね。レイジングループのストーリーは複雑に分岐しております。どう分岐したのか管理するのは大変かもしれません。でも心配無用。本作ではシナリオチャートという便利機能が採用されています。メニューを開けばチャートという機能にいつでもアクセスでき、そこからシナリオの全図が見られるのです。さらにこのシナリオチャートを使えば入ったことのあるチャプターにいつでもどこでもどこからでも移動が可能。もう選択肢では必ずセーブとは申しません。これでいつでも選択肢は選び直せますのでご心配なく。シナリオチャート機能についてはまた後でもう一度使いどころの説明がありますので、よくわからなくても大丈夫ですよ。次にキーについて。レイジングループの物語分岐は全て選択肢を選んだ瞬間に発生いたします。後から聞くものは存在しません。その代わりいくつかの選択肢はキーと呼ばれる特定の情報がないと開くことができません。このキーを探すことこそレイジングループの大きな目的だと言えるでしょう。その探し方は実際に手に入った時に説明があるそうですのでご心配なく。ちなみに一度キーを入手して解放されたルートはセーブデータと関係なく開きっぱなしになります。 逆に言うとキーが未入手の状態にはロードしても戻れません。それで読めなくなる文章はありませんので、あまり困ることはないと思いますが、ご承知くださいね。キーがない状態に戻して遊びたいという奇特なお方には、全データを初期化する手もあります。ご利用は計画的に。
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing about this game, and why it's good for beginners. The flow chart that they present you and the choices that you make, you're not constantly punished for making a decision. In fact, the game really does. It really does reward you for doing all of the different decisions, and you really have to do it to get to the true end of the game. So, unlike other visual novels where your choices are seen as rewards or punishments, this game is not that. Plus, there's lots of fun things that happen in all the different scenarios and all the different endings. So you're driven to make those choices over and over again. Again, this is why I really love this. I really love this visual novel.
独特な機能に加え、レイジングループにはノベルゲームとして基本的な機能が一通り揃っています。テキストウィンドウを隠す、バックログ、ロード、セーブ、既読文章のスキップ、次の選択肢までスキップ。ロードやセーブは大体普通の仕組みです。オートセーブ機能もあるにはありますが、新しいチャプターに入るたびにセーブするだけなので、頻繁にはセーブされません。霧のいいところまで読むか、シナリオチャートをご利用いただくか、手動セーブを活用してくださいね。次にオプション設定について。メニューから開けるオプション設定からは、音量調整やテキスト表示スピード調整など様々な設定が可能です。ただ全部説明すると皆様がお眠になってしまわれるので、あとは他の説明書きや誰かさんの追加説明をお読みください。お願いいたしますね、誰かさん。
Right. How about standby functions?
独特な機能に加え、レイジングループにはノベルゲームとして基本的な機能が一通り揃っています。テキストウィンドウを隠す、バックログ、ロード、セーブ、既読文章のスキップ、次の選択肢までスキップ。
Oh, did we already do this? Oh, we must have. Okay. About video sharing. Well, so we're going to follow some of this.
レイジングループはノベルゲーム。物語や展開やオチはとても大事ですから、それら全てを配信されてしまいますと、とても困ってしまいます。さめざめかといってお楽しみは大勢で分け合いたいもの、それは重々承知しております。というわけで、私どもは動画配信していただける範囲を設定しております。ちなみにその範囲は、最初のメインルート丸ごと1本プラスアルファ。具体的にはシナリオチャート上の4潜入の9入村方法はで、選択肢が出るまでが配信可能範囲です。相当な長さがございますので、配信のネタにしばらく困ることはないと保証いたします。むしろ全文読み上げる派の配信主様は喉が潰れないか心配です。無理はなさらずゆったりお楽しみくださいね。ちなみに動画配信の折にはお知らせ機能をぜひともご利用くださいませ。この後現れる選択肢でお知らせ機能をオンにしていただいた場合、動画配信終了のタイミングで突然謎の羊が出現。ここまでよとお知らせいたします。そこで収録はお開きとしていただき、あとは考察やら議論やらをお楽しみいただければ幸いの極みでございます。ちなみに今はオフの状態ですよ。
Let's go ahead and set this on. I think if you really wanted to see the whole thing, I do have most of it on my Switch playthrough. I had a lot of technical difficulties back in the day when I recorded the Switch version, so that's why I think it's okay to leave that version out there for those who want to see it, because there's a bunch of unfortunately there's a bunch of errors in some of the episodes and some of the uploading that happened during that time. So you're not really getting the entire visual novel if you watch my playthrough of that. You're getting a fair majority of it. But for here, since this is the second reading that I've been doing, or the second playthrough, I'll go ahead and follow these instructions, and we'll only play through what the developers and the publisher suggest. So yeah, we're not going to go through the whole thing like we did with the Switch, and then, you know, even if you did go through the Switch replay, there's definitely pieces missing in there because of the problem we had during uploading. So again, I always suggest that folks buy these visual novels. If you don't buy the visual novels, then they're not going to produce anymore, and we'll go back to the situation where we have to depend on independent translators and doing importing games, and I don't think anybody really wants that, especially now since the game is on sale and at a very, very reasonable price. I think to play through this, if I have my normal hour a day play, it still takes a couple weeks to go through this game. So it's packed full of content. Definitely worth it. Of course, I always recommend pick it up for yourself. This is a game that is worth owning and reading through and playing again. But I guess that's all I have to say about that.
また切り替えたいときは0導入のここに来てくださいね。
Let's look here. Okay, about the share function. In Raging Loop, the share function is available throughout the whole game. This is so that you will be free to make screenshots or record for yourself. Like Rikako said, we would prefer if you do not upload the entire work. Please don't go beyond this application. Otherwise, please feel free to use the function reasonably and responsibly. Okay, I'm good. To the main story.
とても長くなってしまいました。ここまでお読みいただき、誠にありがとう存じます。それでは、いよいよ物語の始まりです。限りなく濃い霧と血煙の向こう。繰り返される絶望と悲嘆の果て、人狼村の真実を、どうか、その目でご覧くださいませ。ペコリ。
5/11, Sunday. I closed in on the side of the road and killed the engine. It was steeper than I thought. My bike was on the verge of giving out, so I pushed down and deployed the kickstand. Well, I'm lost. Maybe taking a ride down an unknown road with no sat-nav on me wasn't such a good idea. I just followed the road, so I figured I wouldn't get lost, but now I was in some deep shit. No, cool it. This isn't a big deal. I sighed, took note of the fact that I'd gotten lost in my pocket journal, and then pulled out a map. Suddenly, a rush of memories flitted into my mind. We'll forget it. We need a key to unlock it anyway. I somehow kept myself from remembering those things. After all, I'd gone on this trip to forget.
もうやめやめ、目の前の現実を直視。人生はシンプル。つまりこの道のごとく、真っ暗で道案内もなく、進むか返すか。考えることはそれだけ。
Going back wasn't an option in this case, so I just moved forward. Still, I wanted to know where I was, at least, so I looked down at my map. It was all Greek to me. Last time I'd seen a sign, it was still light out, meaning that I'd gotten lost after the sun had set. Sure, it was my own fault for just guessing which intersections I'd been passing through, and that it'd taken me 2 hours to conclude I was lost. Crazy to think that just 2 hours of aimless driving got me almost completely surrounded by mountains. They extended as far as the eye could see. If you flipped this scenery upside down and shook it, it's likely even a shred of civilization. It's unlikely even a shred of civilization would tumble out. Besides, the asphalt below, my sweet ride, and the lamppost above, the first one in a while, mind you, there was nothing man-made here. The pocket map I had wasn't detailed enough for me to figure out where I was.
進むか。
I'd go as far as I could. Worst comes to worst, I would just camp at the side of the road. Two hours later, I deeply regretted ever thinking that. Basically, camping wasn't an option. The mountain road had no side to camp on. A dump truck I'd passed barely even fit on it. I'd also had my first close encounters with wild forest animals. I'd already seen 2 boars and 3 deer in those 2 hours alone. One of the deer had run parallel to my bike while intently staring at me, and I had no idea what to think of that. I felt like it could smell my fear and did it just to make it worse. How dare the thing do that to a human? We're the kings of this planet, damn it. I'd have to remember to eat some venison once I came back to civilization. Anyway, camping out here was a bad idea. I'd end up as either roadkill or animal food. And yet, I didn't back out. Why? Because I'm a pretty warped sort of guy, and I don't pretend otherwise. That was actually the reason why my once comfortable relationship had gone awry, and why I'd gone on this stupid trip. Still, despite acknowledging that, I chose to keep moving forward. It wasn't like I'd find a place to stay if I went back. I was actually starting to think that this experience might make a good conversation piece sometime down the road. It was really getting late at this point. Where would these roads take me anyway? It'd probably be disappointing. Soon enough, the road became flat. I was out of the mountain pass. The forest remained abundant, though, so I still didn't see much. Even so, the street lights and signs were enough to make me feel I was, again, nearing civilization. Was street lights the right expression for lights in a forest? I'd have to look that up. As the road grew less rugged, I realized just how exhausted I was. All this bike handling had left my hands really sore, too. I really had to rest. Suddenly, I saw something unexpected. Powerful, colorful, artificial lights. A convenience store? Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was next to an intersection between the road I was on and another, even thinner road that could probably support only a single car. The sea of trees ended, giving room for the majestic child of our consumerist society. Yeah, that was an exaggeration. Apparently even a damn store was a big deal for someone who just stepped out of the wild. It was called Fresh Market. I'd seen several of them a few times during the day. It was probably a local franchise. The building didn't look all that old. At least the parking lot looked a lot smoother compared to the roads. This was a pretty weird place to build something like that, though. Was I close to a settlement? Or did they actually make a profit off of lost travelers? I just asked that or something. A local shopkeeper was bound to know what was around these parts, not to mention I was thirsty. I was welcomed by a weird chime sound. It looked like a normal convenience store. There were goods on the shelves, a counter on the left, and... Whoa. The worker at the counter was so mean-looking it was scary. She was so imposing I wouldn't have doubted if someone told me she was in charge of some ladies' army corps. Was that supposed to be a greeting? It was so damn cold it actually gave me chills. Was the store shadier than it appeared? Was I about to be stupidly overcharged? Was this how this place made a profit? By taking advantage of lost people and basically beating them out of their money? Shit, that was scary. Clearly the Wonderland had only just begun. Oh, woohoo! I sure was excited for the beating. I grew more nervous and less enthusiastic by the second. I braced myself, but she looked down at a magazine in her hands. Oh, so she was just a slacker. Slightly disappointed, I walked around the store. It was about what you'd expect. There was a small shelf with energy drinks, followed by some stationery, travel goods, sanitary stuff, etc. There were sweets that came with toys, a shelf of cup ramen and dried food, a fridge, a freezer. It all looked normal. It was late, so the daily dish and packed lunch section was completely empty. The only thing special about this place was the section full of unpacked vegetables you'd expect to see at a greengrocer's. Maybe all rural convenience stores were like this? I was slightly surprised by that, but there weren't any local fine foods or anything, so all in all, it was an unremarkable store, if you ignored the clerk anyway. I took a drink and brought it to the register. Yep, she really was the highlight of this place. What kind of clerk smokes while dealing with a customer?
買うのかよ。
Yes, I was actually buying. She was the clerk, and I'd be her god, the customer.
126円。
She didn't even scan it. The register was at the mercy of the clerk. God is dead. Maybe I had to get mad at her?
ちょっといいですか？
あ？
実は道に迷ってしまって。
I quickly turned meek.
街はどっちにあるでしょうか？
あっち。
いや、できれば地図とか。
ない。
Man, this woman.
いや、そんなはずはないでしょ。コンビニなんて大体道聞かれるから、地図は常備してるもんでしょ。
知らねえよ。ないもんはねえ。おとなしく来た道戻れよ。
もう数時間迷ってるもんで、これ以上はちょっと。
その辺の床で寝てけば。
She had to be joking.
いや、お気持ちだけでいいんで、道だけちゃんと教えていただけたら。
ああ、もう、せえな。合ってろ。
The clerk put out her smoke into the ashtray and went to the staff-only area. She came back in no time.
あったわ。
So she did have a map. Of course she did. Even more ill-tempered than usual, the clerk started giving an explanation.
これがこの店。で、十字路を北へ行け。しばらくしたら陸橋があっから渡れ。最初の分岐のとこに大岩があっからそこを右折してあとは直線。
この道？
んだよ。
いや、この先何もなくないです？
書かれてねえだけで集落があんだよ。
そこ以外なら？
富士吉村まで行くには峠道を2時間。こっちなら30分で着く。
Fujiyoshi seemed to be a village. It didn't look too far away, but the road leading to it was a huge branching mess. It was clearly just a paved mountain pass. I'd had enough of those for one day. I'll probably just get lost again.
じゃあ、こっち行ってみます。ありがとうございます。
金
はい？
払ってねえだろ、茶のやつ。
ああ、じゃあ500円。なぜ、お釣りを無断で募金箱に入れるんですか？
小銭多いとうぜえだろ。
That was a hell of a line. I casually thanked her, grabbed the plastic bottle of tea, she didn't give me a bag by the way, and left the store. I drank the tea in the parking lot and looked up at the moon, obscured by clouds, but still bright enough to outshine the light of the convenience store. The clerk put me in a bad mood though, so I didn't enjoy the sight. I threw the bottle into a nearby trash can and aggressively drove away. Following the directions, I crossed the overpass and arrived at the first fork in the road. The byway she told me about was really narrow. I probably wouldn't have noticed it were it not for the tall boulder, standing there like a roadside shrine for some traveler deity. Turning carefully, I got onto the road. A minute later, I found myself in an even worse wilderness than before. A veil of dead leaves covered the ground, tall grass sided the path, and the sky above was blocked by overgrown shrubs, making it feel like I was passing a wooden tunnel. The road itself was a huge red flag. It was a wonder why I didn't just turn around. The exchange from before might have pissed me off more than I thought. Still, I really didn't expect the road to just end. It happened about 15 minutes in. The view ahead suddenly turned strangely dark, and a split second later, the bike tipped forward. I reflexively hit the brakes, but it was too late. I started going down a cliff. My bike tilted downwards, and its suspension was put to the greatest test yet, as we basically tumbled down to the bottom. The headlights suddenly shone on some dirt and grass. I knew then that I'd be flung out of my seat. Stifling a scream, I tried to work some steering and brake magic to slow down without collapsing. But that was too big of a task for a simple road bike. At the bottom of the cliff, it jumped higher than ever before. The suspension couldn't handle the impact, and I was launched into the air. A moment later, I heard a crash and felt an impact, after which came an unpleasant pain. An accident where I was flung out like that was the first for me. The launch was really something too. I did a 360 in the air and fell on my back. My breathing stopped for a moment, and the pain was so bad I thought all my bones shattered. My face and limbs seemed pretty fine at least, though I wasn't sure if that counted as a silver lining. There was grass under my hands. I felt it even through the gloves. That and the smell of green made it pretty clear what I had landed on. I pushed down and my hand sunk. The grass growth was pretty hefty, and it was probably the reason why I came out relatively okay. Sure, my joints creaked when I stood up, but aside from that, I was fine. It was really dark, so I couldn't really confirm it, but I was pretty sure I wasn't even bleeding. My back, however, wasn't clearly as lucky. It was lying on its side, a short distance ahead. The engine was still on. The back wheel kept on turning, making an unpleasant fricative noise. Yep, it was busted. I walked up, killed the engine, and took the key. With the headlights off, I was surrounded by absolute darkness, so I just stood and waited until my eyes adjusted. I still couldn't see very clearly, but it looked like this actually wasn't a cliff. I was still on a road, it just wasn't paved beyond this point. Obviously, a road bike stood no chance against an unpaved road. That woman actually tried to kill me. Zigzagged through the trees, I followed the narrow footpath deeper into the forest. I tried getting my bike up and running again, but instantly gave up. It was partially stuck in mud, so there was the risk of it slipping and getting me into another accident. Maybe I had to turn around? The moment I considered that, I thought I saw a faint light ahead. If that woman wasn't lying, the road led to a settlement. Was I close? I reached into my jacket's pocket, took out my phone, and opened it up. As you'd expect, it was out of range. I ran the light app and shone a light to see better. Though weak, it was better than nothing. At the very least, it helped me watch where I was going. I had no idea how long I'd been walking for, but sure enough, I could see a light beyond the shrubs. It was weaker than expected. A flashlight, perhaps? I could hear water, too. I might have been near a river.
すいません
I raised my voice.
すいません誰かいませんか
Still declaring my presence, I walked forward. It was late at night. Were I to bump into someone here, the scare would probably take away a few years of our lives. That was why I figured it was best for both of us to let the other know we were here before that happened. However, there was no response. Could they not hear me over the rapids?
すいません
I shone my light ahead and realized I'd made it to an opening. Sure enough, there was a river, or a stream rather. I could see slightly more than I had while surrounded by trees. Straining my eyes, I saw a rocky river beach and the shallows. The light I'd seen was on the other side. From what I could tell, it was either a lantern or a flashlight, and it was close to the ground. I didn't see any people, though. No one responded to my shouting either. I wasn't excited about it, but I decided to step into the water. The cold water quickly soaked my shoes and socks. I could have taken them off, but I figured that crossing a river barefooted at midnight was a bad idea. But man, was it cold. I put my phone back in my jacket. I needed both my hands free in case I fell. Not stopping or backing down, I walked towards the light. It suddenly became deeper. The water reached my knees now. That was too close for comfort. Feeling the bottom with my toes and balancing myself, I somehow avoided losing my footing. The flow was fiercer than I'd expected. If I slipped and fell, I'd probably be washed away. It suddenly hit me I was doing something really weird, but it was too late to back down. Putting my hands on the boulders and carefully checking what I was stepping on, I gradually made it to the other shore. Then, with an unpleasant wet sound in my every step, I walked up to the light. I could already see it clearly. Yep, it was a flashlight, lying on the ground for some reason. There wasn't much space here. It was a narrow riverbank with a cliff right beside it. As you'd expect, I didn't see or sense anyone nearby. What the hell? Though old, the flashlight was working fine. The strength of the light told me the battery was pretty full. That meant that someone was actually using this tonight, or rather until just a few moments ago. That was the most logical conclusion. It obviously wasn't left here yesterday afternoon or evening, and yet the user was nowhere in sight, and I was near a river. Did something bad happen? Did the flashlight's owner step into the stream and get swept away? That was the most likely and worst possible scenario. However, the flashlight was left there practically buried in the pebbles. It didn't seem like someone placed it there to light things up. It was the dead of night. There was no way you wouldn't notice dropping your flashlight when it was so dark. Right. The fact that the light source was left in a place like this was strange by itself. With that considered, what was going on here? What if someone heard my stupid shouting and decided to lure me in with a light so they could ambush me? Where would they attack from? Above?
こんばんは。
I heard a voice the moment I looked up. The rock cliff was actually made of several boulders. There was a face peeking from behind one of them.
こんばんは。
ああ、人だ。びっくりした。
That was my line.
悪いんだけど、それ取ってもらえます？
The voice was feminine. I finally realized what was going on.
落としたってわけですか。
I picked up the flashlight and pointed at the source of the voice.
やん。
High-pitched voice, slender hands shielding the light. Sure enough, it was a young woman.
眩しいな。
お、失礼。ちなみに、こっちはこういうものですが。
怖いです。下から照らさない。
実は、当方道に迷っており。
だとすると、割と究極的に迷ってますよ。
Yeah, thought as much.
ここって、人里です。
難しい質問だな。
とりあえず、助けてもらえないかと。
助ける？
雨露しのげて、野生動物がいなければ何でもいいんで。
Standing on the boulder, the young woman made a pensive face.
じゃあ、打ち来ます？
And that was the conclusion she'd arrived at. Her face told me she was 100% serious. Place. My place? By that, she surely meant a house, a settlement.
いいんです。頼んどいてなんですが、遠慮を忘れてすがりたい程度には切羽詰まってるんですが。
え？男として？
ええ。いや違う。一個の生命として。数時間迷った挙句、バイクでこけて、心身ともに限界ってわけです。
あらら。なら、見捨てるのもどうよって感じじゃないです？一個の生命として。
And so, I was saved. Oh, the beauty of living beings looking out for each other.
じゃあ手、いいです？
ん？
ここ、一人じゃ登れないでしょ？
True. Honestly, I didn't even realize I'd have to. Meeting another person filled me with relief, which was followed by a sudden wave of fatigue. It wasn't crippling, though. She extended her left hand, so I grabbed it with my own left. Her slender fingers were stronger than I expected. The girl's name was Chaimi Setazawa. I asked if she was related to the Shinshigumi guy, but she said that her family had just adopted the name at some point in the Meiji period. She was a 21-year-old who went to a college far away from here. This was her hometown, and she was spending her post-exams vacation here. We chatted about stuff like that once she led me out of the rocky ravine. There was actually a proper path, so the rock climbing was pretty pointless, but I was too focused on my footing to comment. She told me about herself as soon as we reached solid ground.
ちなみにそちらは？
名前は久石春明。東京で大学院生やってます。
あ、じゃあちょっと年上。
24だから、芹沢さんと3つ違いかな。でもまあ、同世代でしょ。
ちえみでいいですよ。敬語とかもいらないです。
じゃあ僕も、呼び捨てタメ口がいいな。
ですか？
女の子に親しくされてるみたいで、嬉しいからね。
なるほど。実は私も堅苦しいの苦手なんで、じゃあ遠慮なく。
どうぞどうぞ。ちなみに、まだ結構遠い？
そうでもないかな。もう5分くらい頑張りましょい。
What a lively girl. You could tell she was used to people.
ただ、足元に気をつけて、明かりだけ見て。
何かあるの？
この辺、石ころだらけで危ないんだ。
The moment she said that, I stumbled on a rock too big to be called a pebble.
あと、今夜は随分暗いしね。
I couldn't see the moon anymore. Nodding in agreement, I focused on following the light in her hand.
ちょっ と待っててもらえます？着替えちゃうんで。
And so I did just that. Given this was a mountain settlement, I'd expected some old wooden house, but she actually lived in an apartment block. It was too dark to get a good look at it. All I could see were the cheap-looking walls, like you'd expect from some old boarding house for students. Also, she lived on the second floor, in room 202. I'd heard some raindrops as we were climbing the rusty stairs, but now it was really pouring. Between that, the darkness, and the large tree right next to the building, it was nearly impossible to see what was going on outside. It felt like I was all alone in a world of nothing but the walls, the door, and the fluorescent lamp above my head. It made me feel somewhat helpless. I distracted myself from that by imagining her changing. Eventually, the door opened.
お待たせ。上がって。
All smiles, she showed herself, now wearing sports clothes. This was kind of exciting.
なんにもないでしょ。
何にもないね。
でも冷蔵庫の中はほら。
素晴らしい。
飲みますか。
やったぜ。
Yeah, her place really was empty. It was just a small room with a low table in the middle, a fridge near the door, and a large duffel bag deeper in. There were 2 old-looking bookshelves, too, but they were completely empty. I wasn't bothered one bit, though. Any girl's room was a wonderland to me.
じゃあ大変だった春明さんにお疲れ様。
地獄で出会った仏様に乾杯。
We opened up our cans, knocked them together, and downed them. Hey, it was actually good. The pleasant bitterness and the refreshing carbonation made for a good combo.
はあ、美味しい。このためだけに生きてる。
その若さでそれはないでしょ
言い過ぎた。愛や将来にもまだ絶望してません。
う。ところが就活という影が迫る。
いややめて。せっかくのビールがまずくなる。
She laughed and took a huge sip. It was pretty clear she could hold her drink. That aside, something really bothered me.
お誘いに乗っておいてなんだけど。
何？
Her cheeks were already red. Maybe she didn't handle her liquor as well as I thought. She had a well-featured face, and I didn't think it was wrong to consider her beautiful. Sure, her clothes weren't the least bit sexy, but I could tell she had some makeup on.
僕は完全に正体不明の自称迷い人だよね。
そうね。
君は年頃の女性。今は深夜。ワンルームの密室で男と二人っきり。その上アルコールまで入ってしまった。
おお。
身の危険を感じたりとかは？
Okay, let's get the music down just a hair more. Oh boy, it's either it's a significant amount more, but oh well. She kept gulping the drink even as she formulated a response. The very fact that I could watch her do that made this a pretty risky situation, and yet.
あんまりないかな。
それは。
芹沢千恵美クイズ。
イエーイ。
問題。ふと気づいたら低層が瀬戸際にもかかわらず芹沢千恵美は特に身の危険を感じない。なぜでしょう？
What a fun girl. This only made me like her more, increasing the danger even further.
質問 OK？
どうぞ。
僕のことがいい人っぽいという答えはなしでいいかな。
悪い人に見えるってわけじゃないけど、まあなしかな。女の子慣れしてそうだし。
That unintentional compliment showed that she actually did see me as a potential danger.
考えられる回答は大きく2つ。想定外だが何が起きても問題ない。もしくは想定通り。
ふむ？
前者はいろいろ考えられるかな。例えば、ちえみちゃんが何かやけっぱちになっていて、どうにでもなれって場合。あるいは、十分な自衛手段がある。実は護身術の達人で、僕なんか軽く乗せるとかね。
おー、論理的。春明さん理系だね。
まあそうかな。一方で後者、つまり、この状況が君の想定通りって場合は。
例えば、私がエロエロですとか？
Wow, talk about not mincing words.
酔っ払ってきたな。さて、他には何があるでしょう？
Indeed, what other reason could a woman have to bring a stranger to her home? It would surely be something non-standard, like...
僕の存在が君の利益になる例。例えば、アリバイ工作。君がここにいたと、後日僕が証言することで君が有利になる。
おー、ちゃっかり利用するわけだ。
あるいは、ちえみちゃんが恐るべき殺人鬼で僕を酔っ払わせてぶっ殺す。
はあ、ヤマンバ。いいね。ブッシュブッシュ殺しちゃう。
What kind of sound effect was that?
ちなみに前提で出た2つのケースの他に1つあるよ。
あれ抜けてた？
うん。私がとってもいい人で春明さんを助けてあげたい一心だっていうケース。
Was it time for me to be ashamed of my filthy mind?
いやでもそれで自分が襲われるかもって考えたら。
おー、襲うって言っちゃったよこの人。
一般論ね。
She stopped talking and turned red. It was so cute, I thought she was actually doing it on purpose. Man, was she drunk. And we were just on our second cans. Alright. Let's see, why don't we stop it there? This is audapostrophe. You've been watching Raging Loop on the PlayStation 4, although we are playing on the PlayStation 5. Again, it is on sale right now. I definitely suggest people pick it up. If you're new to visual novels, this is a great first visual novel to start on, assuming you're into the genre, you know, kind of the mystery, horror, suspense. If you like all that stuff, I can hardly suggest this, either on the PlayStation 4 or the Switch. Generally, I prefer things on the Switch, but again, if you only have a PlayStation 4, then this is worth your time and money. And honestly, even if it wasn't on sale, it'd be worth your time and money. You know, it really is that good. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.